The shoreline of California has long been one of the state's chief attractions, a place of leisure as well as labor. To the men who work here at this shipyard near Long Beach, each sound has a specific meaning. The hiss of a torch, the whine of a saw, the hard clang of rivets being driven home. But at another time, in another place, the sounds were not quite so identifiable, nor so easily explained. Some said they came from a hammer in a ghostly hand and echoed from the deep bowels of a jinxed ship called the Great Eastern. From the day she was launched until she ended up in a scrapyard like this, it was said the Great Eastern carried a macabre cargo, two ghostly passengers yearning for escape or for revenge. The story of that haunted voyage will be the first stop on our journey into the strange, the bizarre, the unexpected. Come face to face with an outrageous performance of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody. Listen to the world's longest musical instrument. Witness one of the weirdest invasions in the history of ancient Venice. Share a natural hot tub with the amazing snow monkeys of Japan. See a ferocious battle for survival between honeybees and giant wasps. Fly the newest machines in the sky. Take a look at planes invented before the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk. And a few devices that almost made it into the air. The strange, the bizarre, the unexpected. These are the kinds of subjects a man named Robert L. Ripley challenged us to
believe it or not.
A shipyard is a busy place, noisy and dangerous. And it was in such a place that the story of a jinxed ship began. For that tale of the supernatural, we have to return to England in 1857 when a mighty ship named the Great Eastern was launched on an ill-fated course that still haunts those who go down to the sea. During construction, 2 workmen fell to their deaths. A child laborer was impaled on an iron bar, and 2 men, a riveter and his young assistant, were reported mysteriously missing. And it was their ghosts, it was said, that were the bizarre passengers on a disastrous voyage that started when the ship was launched. Just to get it into the water, a dozen workmen were injured, and 2 would later die. For the ship's master designer, I.K. Brunel, the Great Eastern would also prove to be fatal. Although he explained the ghostly hammering that haunted the ship as the simple contraction and expansion of its steel plates, disaster continued to stalk the ship. In 1859, 5 men were killed when a giant funnel blew up. When the news reached Brunel, he collapsed from a stroke. He would die a week later. The string of bad luck, however, had not run out. The ship proceeded to pile up an alarming record of exploding boilers, broken masts, and smashed paddle wheels, always accompanied, it was said, by the persistent sound of distant hammering coming from somewhere between the inner and outer hulls of the ship. Seamen on the Great Eastern were convinced there were ghosts aboard, and if any additional proof was needed, it was provided on the day the ship struck a submerged rock in Long Island Sound and ripped an 83-foot gash in her starboard side. After inspecting the damage, diver Peter Falcon made a most unsettling report. He had heard, echoing through the water, the eerie sound of a persistent banging, the dull thuds of a ghostly hammer in a long, dead hand. Workmen refused to go below decks. It was only when the captain found a plausible explanation for the ghostly hammering that they agreed to go into the darkness of the ship's cavernous hold. The fear that the Jinx ship was haunted, however, was far from laid to rest. The Great Eastern was refitted as a cable layer, but after a series of unexplained accidents, the ship failed spectacularly. In mid-Atlantic, the cable she was laying suddenly and mysteriously snapped, and 1,200 miles of telegraph lines sank to the bottom of the ocean. After that disaster, the Great Eastern's days were numbered. In 1888, she finally ended up in a shipyard to become scrap metal. The ghosts that had haunted the Great Eastern seemed to have won. Reporters gathered in the hope of finding evidence to verify or dispel the often told tales of ghostly happenings aboard the ship. There was no proof that the ghosts or their haunting hammers had in fact existed. There was only rumor, whispered tales of a missing riveter and his assistant who had been left in the bowels of the vessel. Then, as wreckers removed a bulkhead panel, the proof was revealed. The grisly remains of the long-lost workmen, the tools of their trade, still in their bony hands. The Great Eastern, a proud and mighty ship, is no more. And the ghosts who may have guided her disastrous destiny are free, their hammers silenced forever. Believe it or not.
This sci-fi.
Music has charms to soothe a savage breast. That well-known line by the English writer William Congreve may seem inappropriate in these days of heavy metal, high decibel, big beat sounds. But Congreve may have been remarkably foresighted. Listen to his complete thought. Music has charms to soothe a savage breast, to soften rocks, or bend a knotted oak. While to many ears, much of today's music seems capable of softening rocks or bending trees, there's no denying that it has a throbbing, insistent energy that seems in keeping with our times. The band you're hearing now is a good example. Believe it or not, this 7-piece band has only one player, 23-year-old Happy Stokes. He plays guitar, bass, drums, cymbals, saxophone, flute, and he sings and composes his own music. Music has been called mankind's universal language. Infinitely rich in form and sound, it can be ridiculous or sublime, much like mankind itself. In the 18th century, believe it or not, rubbing moistened rims of wine glasses was a popular and accepted means of making music. Mozart wrote at least 2 pieces for the technique. German virtuoso Bruno Hoffmann has revived the art, and his hands produce sounds of haunting beauty. The clear mountain air near Lucerne, Switzerland rings with the sounds of the Alp horn. Nearly 2,000 years old, the horn was used originally as a kind of intermountain telegraph network. Now the Alp horn is heard mainly at village ceremonies and tourist attractions, like this Alp Horn Festival. This year, the gathering features the world's longest musical instrument. It's over 58 feet long and weighs about 100 pounds. Playing this elongated giant requires not only enormous lung power, but special concentration as well. Because the monster takes longer to produce its sound than the standard Alp horn, to stay in unison with the rest of the band, the musician must begin playing his notes 2.5 seconds before the others. Never in its 1,000 years of history has Venice experienced an invasion quite like this. The canals of the ancient city reverberate to the monotonous sounds of urban sax, an assemblage of some 40 musicians from France whose elaborately staged happenings have made them the darlings of Europe's avant-garde music critics. Some call urban sax a jazz ensemble opening progressive new frontiers of music. Others say the group's total performance makes a profound philosophical statement about modern life. And still others have expressed their opinion of urban sax concerts simply by not showing up. concert hall in Italy is the scene of a performance of Liszt's Second Hungarian Rhapsody as it has never been done before. And if these players have their way, it will never be done again. No encores, please, believe it or not. In Assam, India, an entire tree trunk hollowed out and covered with skins is the largest drum in the world. Believe it or not.
Okay.
There's no question the bees can be harmful, but their reputation as killers is vastly exaggerated. Believe it or not, the bee is just about the most precious insect on Earth. Not only does the bee provide us with honey, it also does the pollinating that assures us of the variety of fruits and vegetables that we've become accustomed to. Without the assistance of the bee, we'd be left with very few flowers and little more to eat than nuts and cereals.
Found almost everywhere in the world where plants can grow, the living organism that is the hive of the honeybee is one of nature's most magnificent creations. Whether in the wild or aided by man nurturing bees for honey, the hives are identical, complex communities of six-sided cells. Made entirely of beeswax, a secretion of the bee's body, these delicate-looking structures can support 30 times their own weight. Nectar of the gods to the ancient Greeks, honey has been used by man since the earliest days of recorded history as food, beauty aid, and medicine, to pay taxes to rulers and tribute to conquerors. The only thing sweeter than honey, the Old Testament tells us, is the judgment of the Lord. Longer and slimmer than all the others, the queen is the vital force of every bee colony. She is the only fertile female, the mother of them all. From her first moment of life, the queen has been programmed to assume her regal duties. First, she must seek out all possible competitors and engage in a battle to the death, for she will tolerate no other fertile female in the hive. The battle over, worker bees remove the bodies of the losers and ensure their queen's supremacy by killing the larvae of any potential queens yet unborn. Placing the queen in a plastic cage allows filming her first act, mating. It takes place high in the air. Attracted by her scent, only the strongest males will reach her. They will mate with her and die. This one act, the male's only function in life. Fertilized now for the rest of her life, about 4 years, the queen begins her major task, laying eggs. She will lay 1,500 or more a day. After 21 days, a new bee emerges. By far the most numerous members of the hive are the workers. sterile females who perform all the tasks that keep the complex organization alive. Immediately, they begin work, cleaning out birth cells to get them ready for new eggs or for storage of honey. In constructing a new hive, workers often form a living bridge to handle the large amounts of wax needed for the job. This intricate architecture can be accomplished at a rate of several square feet a week. Workers are also the food gatherers of the bee colony. To fulfill this role, they've evolved an amazing ability to communicate. Once a scout has located and sampled a suitable supply of nectar, she returns to the hive to tell all about it. Performing what can only be described as a dance, she informs the community. Her movements indicate direction and distance. Except for partial color blindness, bees have extraordinary eyesight that perceives ultraviolet in sunlight. Some 6,000 specialized plates on their twin antennae provide excellent sense of smell, and the long tongue enables them to suck nectar from deep within a flower. For a long time, it was thought that spreading pollen from flower to flower as the bees sipped nectar was merely a fortunate accident. But pollen, too, is part of the bee diet. The workers collect it in special sacks on their back legs and take it to the hive, where they mix it with the nectar to create bee bread, the basic food for the young. Honey is nectar that thickens when its water content has evaporated. After workers place caps of beeswax on the cells, the honey will ripen. When it's time for harvest, a beekeeper places an acrid-smelling but harmless chemical atop the hive. It will drive the bees away from the honeycomb. Holding up to 60,000 bees, a hive may yield 200 pounds of honey a year. An electrically heated knife quickly removes the protective wax coating. The wax will be melted down and used for making new foundations of honeycomb. A spin in a centrifuge to extract the honey from the comb completes the harvesting process. Keepers say bees can be handled safely, but only after years of experience. Only female bees can sting. Located at the tip of the abdomen, the barbed weapon is as sharp and tough as surgical steel. As she tries to pull away, the barbs embed themselves in flesh, dragging the bee's vital organs out of her body. Soon she will die, a victim of her own weapon. The sting continues to pump its poison. Rarely fatal, it is to most people a painful but minor irritation. The end of summer, when hives are likely to be filled with honey, is a time of great danger to bees. Seeking to steal the honey, a formidable enemy attacks. An individual bee is no match for the much bigger and stronger wasp, but the invaders are outnumbered. Soldier bees make full use of their superior force to defend their home and their queen. The battle takes its toll. Hundreds of bees are killed, but the hive is saved. Consider the worker bee, builder, architect, wax producer, honey maker, soldier, scout, and nursemaid. She performs all these tasks within a total lifespan of only 6 weeks. Believe it or not. Considering its size, shape, and wingspan, the bumblebee is an aerodynamic misfit and should be unable to fly. Believe it or not. When is an airplane not an airplane? The answer? When it's something like this. It looks like an airplane and it flies like one, but it doesn't have to be certified, and you don't need a license to fly it. Officially, it's not an airplane. It's an ARV, an air recreational vehicle. But mostly, they're called ultralights. Whoever it was that first said, if the good Lord had meant for man to fly, he'd have given him wings, certainly never took a ride in one of these beauties. That's as close to feeling like an angel as I'll ever get. Ultralights are relatively inexpensive, and they're certainly fun to fly. And I'm intrigued that we seem to have come full circle. These contraptions are like the planes that first carried men into the air less than 100 years ago. We, of course, tend to think of the Wright brothers as the first to succeed, but believe it or not, history books tell of manned flights before Kitty Hawk, one more than 20 years earlier. The dream of flying may be as old as any in human history, rooted in our genes since the earliest man gazed at birds and wondered how it would feel to soar through the sky. Most of the early attempts to realize the dream tried to emulate the flapping of birds' wings. Pioneer and crackpot alike tried and failed, and tried again. Many went broke. Some were injured or killed. But the dream was too strong to die. In Russia, a fixed-wing, steam-powered plane designed by Alexander Morzhaisky reportedly made at least one flight as early as 1884. French history says steam-powered planes built by engineer Clément Ader were among the first to fly. Ader built several planes between 1890 and 1897 and tried to sell them to the French military, but was unable to stage a convincing demonstration. Aviation histories contain no mention of this plane. Yet the original of this scale model was reported to have made several flights, believe it or not, 2 years before the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk. The inventor and pilot was Gustav Whitehead, a German immigrant who settled in Bridgeport, Connecticut around the turn of the century. His flights have not been officially recognized. Some critics say his plane could not have flown because the design was unsound. This scale model was built by Kenneth Johnson of Granada Hills, California, to demonstrate that Whitehead's design could fly. Driving a cold wagon by day and working on his inventions at night, Whitehead built several planes, each using parts salvaged from the one before. That's beautiful. Today, his native Germany regards not the Wright brothers, but Gustav Whitehead as the father of powered flight. An honor Whitehead was never accorded in life. New Zealander Richard Pearce was called a madman by his neighbors because he was always tinkering with engines and building strange machines that he said would actually fly. Pearce himself was unsure of the internal combustion engine he built out of junk and odd parts, and as far as anyone knew, no one had ever flown in a powered machine before. The date, March 31st, 1902. The place, Canterbury, New Zealand. Mad Richard Pierce survived the crash and made several more flights, all before the Wright brothers. A failure as a farmer, he continued his lonely quest for flight all his life. He died in 1953, ironically, on the 50th anniversary of Kitty Hawk. It was a cold, windy day in December of 1903 when the two brothers from Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright, made history. Their plane flew 4 times that day. The first flight lasted 12 seconds and covered a distance of 120 feet. The second flight was 195 feet. The third, over 200 feet. The fourth, 852 feet in 59 seconds, set a record that no one but they themselves would equal for nearly 4 years. The Wrights made several trips to Europe where politicians anticipating war were eager to exploit the military possibilities of the newfangled flying machine. In 1909, near Rome, Wilbur Wright took up a passenger. Not the first, to be sure, but the first with a motion picture camera. The result? These first aerial movies. Believe it or not, there were at least 9 powered flights before the Wright brothers, but theirs was the most controlled. Unlike some of the earlier eccentrics and dreamers, Orville and Wilbur kept full records, and they had witnesses. Being good businessmen as well as engineers and inventors, they went on to develop the airplane and produce it commercially. The title, Fathers of Powered Flight, is rightfully theirs. A space station envisioned in France 200 years ago was shaped like a battleship to be lifted by a giant balloon. Believe it or not.
Mystery Science.
Meet Lyman. He's only 6 months old. Believe it or not, this cuddly little creature at the San Diego Zoo is a member of the same order biologically as you and I, and may even be an ancestor. Lyman is a lemur, oldest member of the primate order, which includes monkeys, apes, and man. We have in common eyes that face forward, providing 3-dimensional vision, and that most peculiar primate characteristic, a hand. 4 fingers and an opposable thumb that enables us to grasp and hold things in ways that no other creatures can. Today, wild lemurs are found only on the island of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. But Lyman's cousins, the monkeys, are spread around the world, and their habits and their antics are endlessly fascinating. Monkeys share a common grace. Over 200 species populate the Earth, and they come in a variety of sizes, forms, and colors. The Rock of Gibraltar, last bastion of British colonialism in Europe, also holds the continent's last remaining free-roaming monkeys. By official act of Parliament, the troop of about 40 macaques enjoys the protection of the Crown and the services of Her Majesty's Army. Britain has held Gibraltar for nearly 3 centuries, and over the years, a myth grew that when the monkeys left the Rock, the British would have to go too. During World War II, the monkey population dropped to a single pair, and Prime Minister Winston Churchill ordered additional macaques imported from North Africa to shore up public confidence in the continuing British rule of the Mediterranean fortress. Today, the monkeys are still cared and accounted for in the best military tradition. Unable to make the little blokes stand for parade ground inspection, the sergeant in charge takes roll call wherever he can. All the monkeys have been given names. Roger, this 1-year-old, looks a bit under the weather. The solicitor Sarge decides to take him to the hospital for a checkup. The rest of the pack has strong opinions about this bit of treachery. It will be several months before the sergeant will regain their trust. At the hospital, diagnosis and treatment are provided by the garrison's medical officer, and a few days later, Roger is ready to go home. The closest relationships between monkeys and man are found in India, where Hanuman, descended from a monkey, reigns as Hindu god of the masses. Monkeys are Hanuman's children, and throughout most of India, they're regarded as sacred. In many parts of India, monkeys seem to be almost an independent nation. They come and go as they please, establishing residence wherever it seems convenient at the moment. Human babies and children may starve, but the monkeys always get enough to eat. These are langur monkeys, and they're officially classified, even by biologists, as Hanuman langurs. One legend tells how the monkeys got their black faces and paws. Their ancestor Hanuman narrowly escaped being burned at the stake after he had rescued the goddess Sita from an evil monster. His hands and face were scorched, and the marks of his bravery have been carried by his descendants down through the centuries. In most communities, the langurs are treated fondly, almost like naughty neighborhood urchins. But as a general rule, they're encouraged to stay outside. In bazaars and marketplaces, which are the monkeys' prime targets, shopkeepers are frustrated. They'll shout and threaten, but that's about all, for the little thieves are still the children of Hanuman. We think of monkeys as creatures of the tropics, but believe it or not, there are snow monkeys, macaques living in the Japanese Alps of Honshu Island. Adapted to the bitter cold of winter, They live farther north than any other primate, except man. And being Japanese, of course they get special pleasure from Mother Nature's outdoor hot spring bathhouse. Although the hot baths may give the impression that the macaques enjoy an idyllic existence, theirs is a hard life. Every year, several members of the troop, usually older or weaker ones, fail to survive the northern winter. For 3 decades, the Japanese island of Koshima has been the scene of a classic experiment in the evolution of social behavior. Lured away from their jungle habitat by food placed on the island's sandy beaches, the macaques quickly adapted to the new environment. First, a few of the more adventuresome began swimming, but it wasn't long before most other members of the troop joined in. By all appearances, the tree-swinging denizens of the jungle have become sunbathing beach bums. The change of environment and the abundance of man-supplied food created other new behavior. With all that food available, the monkeys found a way to increase the amounts they could carry, a clue, perhaps, to the evolution of upright posture in man. The monkeys quickly learned that dipping their grain or sweet potatoes in a freshwater stream was an easy way to get rid of sand. Later, several began dipping clean food in the ocean. From cleaning food to seasoning it, however, is a greater and potentially more revealing behavior. Scientists believe they dip the potatoes into seawater for no other reason than to add salt, an acquired taste that appears to link the monkey even closer to man. Believe it or not. I confess to a certain vice, or weakness, shall we say, for a fine cigar, knowing full well that smoking can be dangerous to your health, as the U.S. Surgeon General so succinctly puts it. Publisher Horace Greeley put it another way when he defined a cigar as a fire at one end and a fool at the other. Ever since Columbus's sailors brought the smoking habit back from the New World 5 centuries ago, there have been numerous attempts to thwart our craving for nicotine, and many people are still trying to put out the fires today. But the most radical of all anti-smokers was probably the esteemed Sultan of Turkey, known as Murad IV, who, in the 1630s, personally enforced his own anti-smoking decree. Turkish citizens were encouraged to either stop smoking or face the executioner's axe. Sultan Murad, it was said, would roam the streets of Istanbul at night, and after catching smokers indulging in the forbidden act, would have them beheaded on the spot. He would leave the headless bodies where they lay, as a grisly reminder of his stern decree. A primitive but effective "thank you for not smoking" sign. Sultan Murad died in 1640, from alcohol-induced gout, by the way. And although thousands lost their lives, smoking continued in Turkey. Ironically, 3 centuries later, one of the most popular brands of cigarette ever sold in America was a Turkish blend in a brightly colored box called, wouldn't you know it, Murad. Believe it.
The mysteries of aliens, the magic of Houdini, the miracles of angels. Now the real stories and events are explained in a thrilling original series, Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles, hosted by Patrick McNee. Coming up next.